This story is about an alien doctor who rushes into the medbay, expecting a crisis only to find a human sitting calmly on the exam table, holding his side and asking for a snack. The distress call came in just past second cycle, when the ship's artificial gravity had begun its sluggish nightly recalibration. Dr. Reschke, head medical officer of the USS Perspicacity, was mid-review of a thoracic nerve cluster case file when the emergency beacon lit up the medbay's interface. The human crew members rarely sent direct alerts. When they did, it usually meant someone had lost a limb, or worse, gotten into another recreational fight over the last pack of chocolate pretzels. He shot out of his work pod, swiping tools into his diagnostic bag, with all 4 limbs, while mentally preparing for trauma triage. He rehearsed containment measures for internal bleeding, spinal injury, radiation poisoning. When he stepped into the exam chamber, he expected cries, maybe blood, hopefully consciousness. Instead, there was silence, except for a low hum and the slow crunch of something brittle. There, on the primary examination table, sat the human. Pale, yes. Sweaty, absolutely. But somehow calm. One arm braced around his side, and the other extended, index finger pointing lazily toward a snack cart. "Hey, Doc," he said through clenched teeth. "Mind grabbing me one of those pretzel things? The cheese-filled kind." Reschke stopped dead. His first 2 arms hung slack by his sides. The other 2 clutched the scanner like it might translate the absurdity before him. "You summoned an emergency response for a pretzel?" "No," the human said. "That was just a bonus. I broke a rib." Reschke's oculars clicked twice before widening. "You what?" "Rib," the man repeated, still pointing. "Left side. Second or third, maybe both. Feels like a xylophone in a garbage disposal every time I breathe in." Reschke advanced slowly, his posture cautious, confused. "Your vitals were elevated. Your intercostal rhythms spiked erratically. That signaled blunt trauma." "Yeah, no kidding," the man muttered, thing folded like cardboard. "What happened?" Reschke demanded, dropping the scanner's nodes onto the human's chest. "Were you assaulted?" "Not exactly." He grunted as he adjusted on the table. "Krex tried to give me a back massage." Reschke's primary antennae twitched. "Your massage caused this level of injury?" The human cracked a pained smile. "Well, I say massage. I think he thought Swedish meant mechanical." Reschke squinted. "Swedish is a human cultural term. It has nothing to do with mechanical force." "Try telling that to Krex," the man muttered. "He used 2 hands to torque my lower back and the other 2 to brace. I heard a pop and felt like my lung had been evicted." "Krex," Reschke said slowly. "The Threxian? The engineer who welded shut the cargo doors because someone looked at them funny?" "Yeah, that guy. Krex is certified in hydraulic press repair, not anatomy." "I know that now," the human barked, then winced and held his side tighter. He meant well. I'd been stiff since the 0G drill yesterday. Reschke ran a full scan. The rib was fractured clean through and displaced slightly inward. Fortunately, there was no lung puncture. Still, it was serious. Pain alone would be enough to incapacitate most species. "You should be sedated," Reschke said. "Not yet. Just give me something to take the edge off." He leaned his head back, eyes fluttering. "I don't want to fall asleep before I get those pretzels. You should not be eating solid food until we evaluate potential organ pressure. I'm not asking for a steak dinner. Just a little snack. I can chew slow." Reschke hissed lightly and turned toward the wall panel. "Your resilience is bordering on concerning." That's what my ex said, right before she threw out my Xbox. "What is an Xbox?" "Never mind." With the analgesic administered and the pretzels reluctantly handed over, Reschke carefully fitted a stabilization brace around the human's ribcage. "You will require immobilization. Minimum recovery time is 6 weeks." 6 weeks? The man frowned. "For one rib?" "It is displaced. You will need rest, monitoring, and 0 exertion. No lifting, no twisting, no combat drills." "Guess that's my excuse to skip Krex's next relaxation session." He bit into the pretzel with a groan of satisfaction. "Though next time, maybe a nice candle and some soft music instead of industrial torque." Reschke recorded the treatment log and notified command. "You should file an incident report." "What, And hurt Krex's feelings? He already looked like someone stole his coolant when he heard the pop. Still, we must document. Injuries from misunderstanding are still injuries. Fine, but make sure you note it was an accident. I don't want this becoming another humans are fragile incident. You are fragile, Reshk said flatly. Rude. As Reshk walked away to sterilize the tools, he paused. Also, you were correct. It was both the second and third ribs. Called it. Eat slowly. I'm savoring the irony. Later that rotation, Krex arrived at the medbay door, arms nervously folded in an origami of shame. He peeked through the viewport, watching the human whose name Reshk had finally remembered was Matthew Doze in a reclined position, one hand still gripping an empty pretzel wrapper. Reshk opened the door and stepped out. He will recover. You should not attempt therapy without anatomical knowledge. I accessed the human database, Krex said quietly. Did you use the medical data? I used the recreational massage files. Those are not regulated. Krex's expression sagged. He asked for help. He said he was tight. And you thought that meant rib manipulation. Krex bristled. I adjusted torque per structural feedback. He is not a pressure valve. He grunted. I took it as positive response. That was pain. Oh. Krex glanced again at the sleeping human. I will repair this. Reshk gave a resigned sigh. Repair? Number. But you can help. Bring him food, not pretzels. Something soft. Krex's shoulders straightened. Soup? Soup. Reshk didn't understand half the things humans did. Their thresholds for pain, their bizarre ways of asking for help, their ability to joke between winces. But somewhere between the cracked bones and cheesy snacks, he was beginning to see why they survived. Even if they did occasionally treat hydraulic engineers like personal masseuses, Matthew woke up 4 hours later, with an impressive collection of aches, and the vague memory of something cheese-flavored stuck to his molars. The sterile ceiling lights of the medbay stared down at him without sympathy. He shifted slightly, just enough to feel the brace dig into his ribs and remind him, in sharp detail, why he was here. A low chime echoed through the room, followed by the doors hissing open. Krex walked in carrying a steaming thermocube, the tips of his digits flicking nervously at the container's corners. Behind him, Dr. Reshk followed, arms neatly folded across his chest. I brought sustenance, Krex said, lifting the container. Soup. I researched broth-based options compatible with your biology. There is no torque required. Matthew grunted and raised an eyebrow. No twisting, no kneading, no structural feedback calibration? No pressure application of any kind, Krex confirmed solemnly. I even used a gravity spoon to stabilize fluid distribution. Matthew tried not to laugh, but ended up clutching his side. Appreciate it, Krex. Really. And thanks for not pancaking my lungs a second time. Reshk handed him a sipping straw. You will need to take small quantities. No sudden inhalation. You guys ever think how weird this job is? Matthew muttered between slurps. Space missions, interspecies misunderstandings, soup through a straw because your friend tried to rearrange your skeleton. I have never experienced an interaction quite like this, Reshk said. I am logging it under cultural collision case studies. Collision is about right, Matthew muttered. The next few ship rotations were uneventful in the way that only bureaucratic fallout could be. Reshk scheduled 3 follow-up appointments. Krex, feeling an overwhelming need to compensate, began leaving daily meal packs outside Matthew's quarters, each labeled with fragile internal structure approved, and a handwritten post-it that simply read, no torque. But the biggest surprise came on day 4, when Command summoned Matthew for an incident debrief. Well, summoned might have been too strong. It was more like they asked politely but attached a reminder that his performance bonus depended on cooperation. Captain Halverson sat across from him in the briefing chamber, hands steepled thoughtfully, her graying hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. Next to her was Counselor Eno, the ship's socio-emotional liaison, and to Matthew's chagrin, Krex. I'd like to clarify the events of the injury, Halverson said, just for protocol. Matthew shifted in the chair, the brace hidden beneath his shirt pulling slightly as he leaned forward. Sure, what do you need? Was there any aggression? Miscommunication? Well, definitely miscommunication, Matthew said. But aggression? Nah. Krex thought he was helping. He applied excessive pressure, Krex said, shame coloring his throat sacs. You're not on trial, Eno said gently, but your statement helps us learn. This is why we're holding cross-species safety workshops next quarter. That sounds thrilling, Matthew muttered. Halverson turned to him. And you agree the injury was accidental? 100%. If Krex wanted to crush me, I'd be soup. Krex looked mortified. I did not intend soupification. We know, Eno said calmly, but there's concern. You didn't report it as a workplace hazard. Didn't feel like one. Felt more like a weird Tuesday. Your ribs were displaced, Halverson said flatly. Point taken. There was a pause. Halverson tapped the table. Then we're marking this as a cultural incident. No formal charges. But we are assigning Krex to mandatory anatomy training. Human-specific? Multi-species. Can I audit it, just to be sure? Eno blinked. You want to attend an anatomy seminar during recovery? I'm the one who got squished. Feels like I should know which bones not to offer for casual therapy. Krex glanced over. I would be honored if you joined. Matthew raised his hand, slowly. On one condition. No hands-on demonstrations. Agreed. The seminar was scheduled for the following week, but word of the incident had already spread through the crew like wildfire in an oxygen-rich room. By day 6, half the engineering team had stopped Matthew in the corridor to ask if it was true that Krex had power-hugged his ribcage into submission. Others asked if this was part of a new stress relief protocol. A few just wanted to know if the pretzels in medbay were still available. Not worth it, Matthew said flatly to one curious ensign. Stick to yoga. Meanwhile, Reshk's logbook had gained an unexpected following. Shipwide health updates now included a footnote about intervention requests requiring anatomical accuracy, and a new disclaimer above the recreational area massage chairs. Human use only, do not apply more than 2.5 newtons of pressure. Reshk privately admitted to Matthew that he'd had to run a diagnostic on himself the night of the incident. I thought I was experiencing emotional paralysis, he said one evening. But it was simply disbelief. I did not know a rib could collapse from massage. You and me both, Doc. By the start of the anatomy workshop, Matthew's pain had dulled to a dull, consistent reminder not to laugh too hard. The brace stayed on, the sarcasm stayed sharp, and Krex, now impossibly careful with every gesture, seemed to have become hypersensitive to even the idea of touch. The first training session took place in the biolab. A holographic human skeleton floated at the center, rotating slowly. This is a rib, the instructor said, pointing. Humans have 24, 12 pairs, fragile, essential, non-load-bearing. Krex took notes as if his dignity depended on it. Next to him, Matthew whispered, That one there? Yeah. That one's the one you folded like a deck chair. Krex didn't respond, but his throat sacs flushed purple. The workshop ended without further incident, unless you counted Matthew's coughing fit when the instructor said, Treat human backs like antique ceramics appreciate. Don't apply pressure. Recovery was slower than he liked. Every movement reminded him that human bodies weren't designed for sudden compression. But the upside? He got a reprieve from the zero-G fitness drills. And Krex, no longer certain of his own strength, started using his bottom arms only, leaving the top two metaphorically on strike. One morning, Reshk handed him a note. It read, Human resilience exceeds prediction, but your bones remain very bendy. I'm framing that, Matthew said. You should rest, Reshk replied. But Matthew didn't sleep. He lay there thinking about all the ways space could go wrong, and all the ways it somehow still went right. Because even when you're 6 weeks from Earth, one rib short of a full set, and living off broth and prescription-grade ibuprofen, there's comfort in knowing that your friends, even the 4-armed alien ones, are willing to learn, even if it takes a collapsed rib to teach them. Week 2 into recovery, Matthew could finally rotate his torso enough to brush his teeth without wincing. Progress, though the med scanner still showed light inflammation around the fracture. Reshk remained firm on restrictions. No heavy lifting, no roughhousing, and absolutely no participation in the shuttleball tournament, even as an umpire. Which meant Matthew had time. Too much of it. He spent most of it lying in the observation dome, the one with reinforced seating after a gravity malfunction last year, had flung 2 crew members into the wall, like rogue laundry. There, with a view of the starline streams flickering past the ship's hull, he tried to pretend time wasn't dragging. Krex, however, remained dedicated. He had transitioned from guilt-ridden engineer to something resembling a very nervous personal assistant. Each day he delivered small things: tea packets from Earth, crossword puzzles, socks with printed instructions on safe zones for massage. Resh called it compensatory overcorrection. Matthew called it mildly adorable. One afternoon, Krex approached carrying a matte black case. "I have constructed an assistance device," he said with great seriousness. Matthew tilted his head cautiously. "Assistance?" "An adaptive brace to support human rib healing. Compliant material, heat reactive, pressure diffusing. It contours to your body using ambient temperature." "You made me an orthopedic vest?" "Yes, with thermal paste. I used your old uniform measurements." Matthew stared at him. "You know, on Earth, this level of dedication would be considered an apology wrapped in engineering." Krex shifted. "I regret my miscalculation. I figured that out when you stopped using your top arms like they were radioactive. You were in pain. I still am, but you're trying to help. That counts." Krex held out the vest. It was sleek, lighter than it looked. The lining shimmered with embedded filament channels, and as soon as Matthew touched it, it warmed faintly. He pulled it on carefully and adjusted the clasp. It molded perfectly. Not tight, just gently supportive. The relief was instant. "You might have a future in medical tech," he said. "I would prefer not to injure anyone else first," Krex replied. Over the next few days, the vest made a tangible difference. Matthew moved easier. He breathed deeper. The brace let him sleep longer without waking every hour from throbbing ribs. Even Resh begrudgingly admitted it reduced strain on the fracture site. "That does not mean you're healed," the doctor reminded him. "But this will aid the recovery process. Just do not remove it prematurely." "Wouldn't dream of it," Matthew said. 2 more days passed. On the 3rd, the Incident Report Review Committee issued its final recommendations. The message popped up on Matthew's terminal during breakfast. He tapped the notification, half expecting some legal jargon. Instead, he got bullet points. 1. Cross-species recreational touch therapy is temporarily suspended. 2. Threxian personnel must complete advanced anatomy training before participating in casual physical interaction. 3. Rib injuries now require automatic 2-week observation, no exceptions. "Well," he muttered, chewing on a protein biscuit, "there goes my post-recovery hot tub plan." Later that evening, Krex invited him to the lower hangar bay, which confused him. That deck was usually used for off-shift drone diagnostics and repulsor tuning. When Matthew arrived, braced and still moving carefully, Krex was standing next to a small open crate. "I have repurposed an old drone," he said, "to deliver safe relaxation stimuli." "What does that mean?" Matthew asked warily. Krex hit a switch. The drone lit up, floated upright, then hovered near Matthew with a soft buzz. 2 small nozzles extended and released a low mist. "Herbal steam," Krex explained. "Non-contact, scented, circulated with positive ions." Matthew blinked as lavender filled the air. "You built me a stress drone. I calculated that your species values non-invasive comfort methods." Matthew stared, then burst into a soft laugh that nearly cost him a sharp stab to the ribs. "It smells like my grandma's bathroom." "Comfortable?" Unexpectedly, behind them, a door slid open and Resh stepped in. "You're releasing ionized vapor in a diagnostics zone?" "It is non-toxic," Krex said. Resh looked at Matthew. "Do you feel relaxed?" "Terrified and relaxed. It's a weird combo." Resh sighed. "Fine, but do not leave the drone unattended." Over the next rotation, the drone followed Matthew around like a floating spa unit. Crew members began casually requesting one for themselves. Krex started scribbling plans for a line of tension relief drones specifically calibrated to non-Threxian tolerances. The working title, "No Torque Monosecond." During all this, Matthew's recovery inched forward. He reached the 3-week mark with decreased pain, increased lung capacity, and the grudging acknowledgement that he missed the gym. The vest, now officially added to Reshk's approved aid list, remained on 22 hours a day. removed only for medical scanning and brief maintenance. Crex came by with an upgraded control patch that let Matthew adjust compression levels. "You really don't have to keep improving this," Matthew said, flexing his shoulder. "I failed to anticipate human structural limits. This is part of my self-directed correction protocol. You're allowed to just be a friend, you know." Crex blinked. "I thought friends brought soup and structural reinforcements." "Well, you're not wrong." One evening, while seated in the observation dome again, Matthew noticed the stars out the window had shifted. They were entering a binary field, the kind with twin suns on the edge of a gravitational anomaly. He tapped the comm panel. "Bridge, this is crewman Lawson. Those suns, are we altering course?" A voice responded. "Negative. Current trajectory remains stable. Gravitational field is mapped and within parameters." Matthew nodded, then turned to see Crex behind him, holding 2 mugs of something vaguely citrus-scented. "I replicated chamomile fusion," Crex said. "Calming properties. Trying to sedate me? Only metabolically." They sat together, mugs in hand, as the stars shimmered across the reinforced dome. Matthew sipped, then sighed. "You know, this whole mess? It's been annoying, yeah, but I think I needed the reminder. Of? That being strong isn't the same as doing everything alone, or being indestructible." Crex tilted his head. "Your skeletal recovery aligns with expected human parameters, but you are resilient, in unquantifiable ways. I'll take that as a compliment." They sipped in silence. Then Crex added, "I will still not touch your back again. Good policy." As the stars rolled gently past, Matthew felt the dull ache in his ribs, the warmth of the vest, the scent of misted lavender still clinging to his sleeves. Sometimes healing wasn't just bone and tissue. Sometimes it was drones, soup, awkward apologies, and one very determined alien trying his best. And Matthew couldn't help but smile at that. Week 6 arrived with little fanfare but considerable stiffness. Matthew stood in front of the medbay's diagnostic console in socks and ship-issue sweats, arms raised, posture stiff as the scanner circled his torso. A soft chime signaled completion. Reshk leaned over the results, humming. "Fracture lines have calcified. Cartilage inflammation is reduced. Range of motion is 95%. "So?" Matthew asked, already half reaching for the Velcro strap on his brace. Reshk held up a claw. "Not so fast. I recommend another week of moderated strain. Light activity, no sports, no lifting Threxians, and especially no experimental massages." I was the one getting the massage. Exactly. Matthew slowly peeled off the brace. His torso felt lighter, exposed. He gave his side an experimental poke, and winced. Less pain, but still there. It wasn't dramatic, just a persistent reminder that healing never clicked into place like a switch. It was slow, uneven, real. Crex arrived shortly after, holding a wrapped bundle in his upper hands. "I've constructed a ceremonial item," he announced. "Is this another medical vest?" Matthew asked, eyeing the bundle. "Number A, pillow. Filled with recycled gel beads, designed to mimic vertebral suspension, for rest. You made me a friendship pillow?" Crex nodded. "I read that such objects are exchanged in human traditions, usually on birthdays or holidays, not post-accidental body compression. I considered waiting, but then it wouldn't be symbolic of your transition from fractured to functional." Matthew unfolded the pillow. It was vaguely rectangular, neon green, and had the words "torque-free zone" embroidered across the front. He laughed, for real this time, and managed to do it without doubling over in pain. "You're ridiculous. You know that, right?" "Frequently." Reshk looked at both of them, antennae drooping faintly. "You humans form social bonds in strange ways. Pain builds character," Matthew said. "No, it builds scar tissue, which you are still developing." Semantics. That night, back in his quarters, Matthew lay on his bunk with the pillow under his head, and the lights dimmed to a warm amber. The no-torque drone buzzed softly in the corner, idle but still active. The scent of that bizarre citrus chamomile concoction lingered faintly in the air. He slept better than he had in weeks. The next morning, the bridge assigned him light duty. No physical strain, just navigational oversight and long-range signal monitoring. The kind of work most crew members found boring, but which Matthew welcomed like an old hoodie, comfortable, undemanding, familiar. By mid-cycle, he was manning comms, while Krex, on the floor below in engineering, sent occasional messages. Krex, remember to breathe evenly. No sudden rotations. Matthew, I'm sitting in a chair. It's not a flight simulator. Krex, just verifying. Matthew, you're worse than my mother. Krex, is she an engineer too? Matthew, number she just worries a lot. Krex, then we have something in common. By week's end, the ship reached the edge of the Curvin Drift, a chaotic stellar region known for unpredictable plasma surges and the occasional micro-pirate attempt. Captain Halverson ordered heightened vigilance. Matthew was reassigned temporarily to bridge-level maintenance monitoring, a role that let him move slowly, review sensor integrity, and recalibrate systems without taxing his recovering ribcage. You trust me with that? He asked Resch during a midday checkup. Provided you don't climb anything or argue with any more crew over recreational protocols, yes. Define climb. Resch sighed. It is like raising a child with a welding license. Matthew saluted. During his rounds, he passed Krex inspecting a junction node. Krex looked up. System latency? Stable, Matthew replied. And for the record, I forgive you, fully. You can stop trying to rebuild your self-worth with orthopedic furniture. Krex blinked, then slowly tucked his lower hands behind his back. Acknowledged. Still want to hang out tonight? Yes. I found a documentary about Earth's deep tissue therapy, and I would like to watch it under supervision. Matthew chuckled. Fine. But no notes this time. That evening, they watched the documentary in the recreation lounge. It featured serene music, rolling hills, and someone named Ingrid doing slow, practice kneading on a volunteer, who made soft sighs of relief every few seconds. Krex was transfixed. She is using less than 1.5 newtons of force. Fascinating. Matthew looked at him. Do you enjoy this? I find it calming, knowing there is a correct way, that I can learn. Well, start with not treating people like carbon tubing. Agreed. 2 days later, during an all-crew safety briefing, Resch presented a short slideshow on non-destructive interspecies support methods. One slide simply read, "Just ask first." Everyone chuckled. Matthew gave a modest wave when someone clapped. After the briefing, he stopped by the medbay one last time for a clearance exam. Resch ran the final scan. Bone density is normal. Flexion good. Full clearance granted. Matthew raised an eyebrow. So I'm fixed? You are functional, Resch corrected. Though I still recommend gentle exercise before resuming high-impact routines. No problem. I'll save the shuttleball rematch for next month. You have a month to warn Krex. As Matthew turned to leave, Resch said, You know, not all patients handle injury with such humor. Trust me, Doc. I wasn't laughing the first few days. True, but you adapted. That's kind of our thing. He left the medbay, pillow under one arm, ribs intact for the first time in weeks, and a plan to avoid anything labeled Swedish for the rest of the mission. Krex was waiting in the hallway with a data pad. I found a new tea blend, he said. Chamomile and peppermint. May I test it on you? Only if you swear not to touch my spine ever again. Sworn. Together, they walked down the corridor toward the mess hall. No drama, no distress call. Just a human with a mended rib, a slightly neurotic alien friend, and the quiet victory of healing done right.